Hey, and welcome back to the All My Love Lucy podcast. This is episode number 35, and unfortunately, Megan is still not back with us. So you have Jennifer again, and it's audio only again. And I would like to ask for some audience opinion on this. How are you liking the audio only episodes? I know periodically when we have to do these, I always wonder how y'all like them. So if you will do me a favor and leave a comment and let us know what you think. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you not care? I know some people listen only anyway because they're doing other things when they have it playing, so it may not matter. I know when we do have slides and photos and that sort of thing, I know video is better for that, but for the rest of the time when we do have to do these audio only versions, how do you like them? I'd like to know. And for first-time listeners, briefly, this is a podcast where each episode we read a letter from our grandmother Lucy in London to our grandfather Jimmie, who was serving in Europe during World War II. Now, they were engaged in London just before he left to go to Normandy for D-Day, and they were planning on getting married there in London shortly after he left. They thought he would be coming back. And then they were going to return to South Carolina to build their lives together. But as we know, the war kept dragging on and they ended up being unexpectedly separated for 2 years. And that's what brings us these letters that we are reading today. Now, this podcast is more like a series podcast. So it's best if you go back to episode number 1 to start because we read the letters in chronological order. And everything will make much more sense. And there's a lot of great information that we've covered so far. So we do encourage you to go back to episode 1. I always like to say, although our production skills were very amateur and we were brand new doing it ourselves, so our production skills are not that great in the beginning, and we're still not professionals about this. But all in all, the story is what's most important. So it's a great story, so just kind of ignore our production skills. Now, today's letter that we're reading is dated October 3rd, 1944, and this is a moment when the war was shifting into some of its most intense and dangerous fighting. London is chilly and quieter than it has been since the Blitz, and waiting anxiously as news spreads the Allied troops have entered Germany. And in the middle of all of this, a young woman named Lucy, our grandmother, hurries home every night to check the mail for a letter from her sweetheart, Jimmie, who she knows is somewhere near the front lines. Today's episode brings us another tender snapshot of love, longing, and the everyday courage of people separated by war. Lucy writes from London, in a London that is trying to return to normal life, while Jimmie sometimes writes back to her from a world he's not really allowed to describe to her. Our job has been in this podcast to fill in the missing pieces, to understand the people and the places and the events and the circumstances that Lucy mentions, and to try to decode what might have been happening in the background of these simple, heartfelt words, and we've made so many amazing discoveries so far along the way. Now today, I have been promising to really get into what Jimmie is doing at this time, and thankfully, I keep mentioning this book, but it's such an amazing resource for us. We have this book, Key to Command, written by our dear friend, Michael Godbout, and so this has been such an amazing resource for us. And so I want you to, I told you last week that we had some potentially exciting news about a possible collaboration of sorts for us and Michael. And so really quickly, I'm just going to go ahead and share that now so I don't forget, because I'll probably forget at the end. We have been discussing for a while now how awesome it would be if we could end up in Europe together at the same time and meet up in Europe. And so Michael already has a trip planned for next September of 2026, and Megan and I were planning on heading back over to London in 2026. We were hoping for May, but we're not sure if May is going to work. So September, we've been in September before. We love it in September. So we're hoping to try to get there at the same time as Michael. And so that'll be kind of this collaboration, and hopefully with Michael's permission, of course, we are hopefully going to be able to video that and share that and talk about that from over there. And I'm not exactly sure where exactly we're going to end up meeting, but that is so, so exciting. We're so excited about that. So I want to share that little bit with you. So now let's open this letter. This letter, again, is October 3rd of 1944. We're going to open this letter and spend a few minutes in Lucy's world, and then we're going to dive in deep into what Jimmie is doing. My darling Jimmie, it is very cold tonight, and I'm sitting in the armchair right beside the fire in order to keep warm. How I wish my darling was here, and then I would not need the fire. I hurried home tonight, hoping I would find a letter from my sweetheart, but it was not my lucky day. You can't imagine how happy I am when I get your letters. So first off, the armchair. We have heard Lucy mention this armchair a lot, and that got me thinking about furniture during this time. Now, in today's world, we have a couple of couches, a recliner or two, some accent chairs, and just multiple places to sit in our living rooms. But I'm guessing that this armchair may have been her only piece of sitting furniture in her living room. It may not be that that's her favorite place to sit. It may be that that was the only place that she had to sit in her living room. I never hear her mention a couch or any other chairs. It's always this armchair. So I'm guessing that's probably the case. And we have seen pictures of the flat that she lived in, and the living room there. It's not a large space, so she probably didn't have a lot of furniture taking up space in that room. Also, right away, we're seeing again, as always, how central Jimmie is to Lucy's emotional world. It's cold in London that night, she says, and we know coal is being rationed at this time, the fuel for this fire. But she lights this fire anyway and immediately ties that physical warmth to Jimmie. Now, maybe she didn't really care about the fuel because she was so cold, or maybe she just needed that physical comfort because she associates that comfort to him while he's away. So when she feels that, she's not just being romantic here. She is associating that warmth to him. And then there's the ritual of her rushing home to check the mail every day to see if there's a letter from him. Now, this was incredibly common for women who were waiting for soldiers during the war. Letters were everything to them. We've talked a lot about that. They were how you knew someone was alive. The letters were how you kept a relationship going when you couldn't physically share your life together at the moment. So when she says here, you can't imagine how happy I am when I get your letters, she really means that. You can really feel how heavy that is and how much she means that. Her whole emotional rhythm hinges on what's in that mailbox each day. Meanwhile, and Lucy doesn't know this yet, but on October 3rd, the date of this letter, Jimmie is in the middle of one of the most intense battles of the Allied advance. His unit, the 50th Signal Battalion, was supporting the attack of Aachen, Germany. That meant he was out in the cold and wet weather, often under shell fire. So while she's by her fire there in London, he's out there in a destroyed German suburb trying to keep the army connected. So her warm and cozy tone here, it's not naive, it's not insensitive to what he may be going through, but I believe it's her way of creating some sort of normalcy for him, of creating a home for him to return to, even while he's living a reality she can't fully imagine. She goes on to say, I wonder in what part of Germany you are. I know you must not tell me, but are you permitted to say whether you are attached to the 1st or 7th Army? I guess you will have a lot of experiences to relate when you return from your travels, enough to fill a book, I should think, and I shall really love to hear about them. Here, Lucy is doing something we see over and over in wartime letters, trying to gently pull information from her soldier without breaking censorship rules. And now she knows he can't say exactly what he's doing. She literally says, "I know you must not tell me," but she still tries to get some sense of what his world looks like. She wants more details. She gives him all of these details. So she's trying to get something back from him. So she asks whether he's with the 1st or 7th Army, which is actually a pretty educated guess for someone at home who's listening to wartime news. She's trying to put pins on a map, so to speak, so that she can connect to him and see where he is. But what she doesn't know is that she's almost exactly right. Jimmie is with the 1st Army supporting the 7th Corps attack on Aachen. But he can't say that. He can't tell her all these details. So she's reading the headlines in London and trying to connect the dots without scaring herself and without reading too much into it. And then she shifts into this sweet, hopeful kind of daydreaming. She's imagining him someday telling her everything, enough to fill a book. It's her way of imagining a future past the war, a future where he's home safe and sitting beside her, telling her all the stories about the war. Now, we know a lot of soldiers did not do that. They returned and they did not want to talk about it. So I'm not sure how much Jimmie talked to her about this once they were reunited. But for now, the only stories that she gets are the ones he's allowed to send, and they're probably short and vague and, of course, heavily censored. So this paragraph captures both her curiosity and her fear and also her longing for a future where the mystery that she's experiencing of these days here becomes something that they can finally talk about openly. Now, for the next few moments, I'm going to dive in to what Jimmie is actually doing. I've been promising this for a while now to really get into the nitty-gritty of what he's doing. And thanks to the book Key to Command, we have this wealth of information. And so we're going to talk about Aachen. I just mentioned that briefly, that he is with the 1st Army supporting the 7th Corps attack on Aachen. Now, for a little bit of history about Aachen, and I think I listened to pronunciation to make sure I was saying that correctly. I hope I am not butchering that. But so Aachen's story begins long before modern Germany, when Roman settlers built baths around its hot springs. But the city's true rise came with Charlemagne, the Frankish king who ruled in the late 700s and early 800s. The Emperor Charlemagne, I know you've heard of him. Charlemagne chose Aachen as the political and cultural heart of his empire. He built a grand palace complex here, including the magnificent Palatine Chapel, which still forms the core of Aachen Cathedral today. From here, he oversaw what became the Carolingian, if I'm saying that correctly, Carolingian Renaissance, which was a revival of learning, art, and administration that shaped medieval Europe. Now, after his death in 814, Charlemagne was buried in Aachen, and for centuries afterward, German kings were crowned in that city that he built. By the early 20th century, Aachen was a blend of medieval charm and industrial energy, narrow old streets, factories, rail connections, and always that towering cathedral at its center. I would love to be doing video this week because I could put some good pictures up for you to see, but if you want to, just look it up, Aachen, Aachen, Germany, and you can see some of the photos and see that cathedral. In 1944, Aachen became the first major German city to face the advancing Western allies. The Battle of Aachen was intense and destructive, fought street by street. Most of the city was reduced to ruins, yet the cathedral, Charlemagne's chapel, survived with only limited damage, standing as a symbol of endurance amid the rubble. We hear about this a lot, about these cathedrals standing and enduring. It's really amazing. Now, on October 21st of 1944, Aachen surrendered, marking a turning point on the Western Front. After the war, the city rebuilt itself with care. The old town was restored, the cathedral repaired, and Aachen stepped into a new identity. Today, it's a major university hub, thanks to Aachen University. It's also a cross-border city which links Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands, and it's a place where Roman baths, medieval architecture, and modern research institutes exist within minutes of each other. It's a city that remembers its past but looks forward, which is a fitting legacy for the emperor who once called it home. And of course, Megan and I want to add this to our itinerary. I don't know that we'll get there, but I would love to visit and see this. Now back to Jimmie. At this point in the war, Jimmie, of course, we've mentioned this a lot. Jimmie is serving with the letter A company of the 50th Signal Battalion, which is part of the U.S. Army's 7th Corps. That's under the 1st Army. And that details 7th Corps is the key to knowing what he was actually experiencing while Lucy wrote to him. And I'm going to put a link to this book, Key to Command by Michael Godbout, in the description. So if you're interested in more of what the 50th Signal Battalion was doing, this is a very interesting book. Michael spent 25 years of his life researching for this book and compiling all of this information and firsthand accounts from veterans. He interviewed so many veterans and they told their stories, and it's really amazing. It's a really great book. So if you are more interested in what Jimmie's doing and that part of our story, of our grandparents' story, and you want to follow along the timeline of what Jimmie was doing, even though we may not mention it all the time, then buying this book would be a great way to do that and to support our friend Michael Godbout. And so to continue, as these letters were being exchanged between Lucy and Jimmie, 7th Corps was taking part in one of the most important battles on the Western Front. I said that a minute ago. This encirclement and assault on the German city of Aachen. Again, the first major city on German soil to face Allied invasion. While the infantry and the armored divisions pushed toward the city, units like the 50th Signal Battalion kept the entire operation connected. Signal soldiers like Jimmie were the communication lifeline. They were the ones who made sure that commanders could talk to one another, that artillery knew where to fire, that orders moved across the front even when everything else was chaos. A very vital role, and Jimmie was part of this. So that meant laying miles and miles of telephone lines, repairing them when the artillery fire cut them, relocating switchboards as the front kept moving east. These men, like Jimmie, operated just behind the front lines and sometimes under direct fire. And we've talked about Jimmie. We told a story about Jimmie being up on a telephone pole and getting fired at. So it was sometimes directly under fire. They worked at night. They worked in the rain, in all weather conditions, and the weather was bad at this time. In Michael's book, it talks about that the weather in October was really, really bad. They worked in mud thick enough to swallow trucks. I was reading in that book too. It talks about the trucks getting bogged down in this thick, thick mud. And so whenever communications went down, they had to go out and fix it. So Jimmie was having to go out and fix these communication lines no matter what was happening around them, because they had to be able to communicate. In late September, they were supporting the American divisions that were closing in around Aachen from the north and the east. Places, German towns that were just beyond the border, were full of shell fire, falling buildings, booby traps, and constant movement. And in the middle of all that, A company, the part Jimmie was involved with, was laying wire through fields, through ruined villages, over railroad tracks, through forests, and sometimes through streets that had just been fighting war zones just hours before. By the end of September, the Americans were preparing to push into Aachen itself, and on the day before this letter that Lucy is writing here, the Battle of Aachen officially began. From that point onward, the fighting turned into brutal, block-by-block urban combat. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble, and every time a building would collapse or a shell landed, telephone lines snapped. We can kind of get a sense of that. Even recently, I said during Hurricane Helene, right after that happened, when I would be driving down the road, I've never seen anything like it. It looked like a war zone is what I was saying, what my mom was saying. It looked like a war zone. These telephone poles and telephone lines snapped in half and just down everywhere. So you can kind of get a sense and a visual of what some of this might have looked like. And so someone had to go out and fix them during this time. And Jimmie in the A company, part of A company, that's what they did. And so that was almost certainly what he was out there doing. So he just wasn't allowed to tell Lucy all of this. He couldn't detail all of this, which again is why we're so thankful to have this book, Key to Command. So when Lucy writes about her day in London, and when Jimmie writes back with his short, careful, censored answers, behind his quiet words is the reality of where he really was. He was in the middle of one of the most dangerous and strategically important battles of the Allied advance. So that's what Jimmie is doing at this moment in time. Lucy's writing as a young woman in London, trying to hold on to normal life and hope for a future. But Jimmie, when he writes back, he's writing from the edge of a city that's being fought over street by street. And those two worlds, hers and his, meet in these letters. And to think of that is quite amazing. She goes on to say, "Well, my love, I'm really very sleepy, but I just could not go to bed without writing you a few lines to say I hope this finds you safe and well, and to say how much I long to be with my darling sweetheart. Good night, my dear love, and God bless you. With all my love, from your very own Lucy." These last parts of Lucy's letters are always so incredibly tender. Here she's exhausted, she's sleepy, but she can't go to bed without writing to him. And that's how central this ritual has become in her life. Writing to Jimmie is the closest she can come to ending her day beside him, and she always wants to do that. When she says, "I hope this finds you safe and well," she's not just being polite. She's not just spouting off this line. That's the daily fear every woman had whose loved one was overseas fighting. By the time her letter reached over there where he was, so much could have happened, and she had no way of knowing. And she always signs off her letters with this deep affection. "My darling sweetheart, my dear love, God bless you." And then she signs "your very own Lucy." It's like she's trying to hold him through that paper, and you can feel that each time. She can't give him warmth or safety physically, so she gives him words, as many as she can before she goes to sleep. And while she's drifting off in her room in London, on October 3rd, Jimmie is probably nowhere near sleep. He's over there working through the night to keep the Army's communications alive in one of the toughest battles of the campaign. They're in two completely different worlds, but connected by these letters that meant everything to both of them. And this, in closing, is the intimacy of wartime love. Two people trying to share a life when the world keeps pulling them apart. And this is the story of our grandparents and how they came together. So we continue on this journey with Lucy and Jimmie as they detail their lives and longing for one another. And we're discovering so many amazing facts about life during this time. Next time, we hope Megan will be back with us and that we'll be back to our video episodes. And also, next time, I read ahead to the next letter. It's so interesting. I love it. She starts to get into more and more details. I told y'all that a couple of letters ago. She starts getting into more and more details. And so this next letter, she gets into some details of rationing and what that looks like personally for her. So it's very interesting, and I hope you'll join us. So don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel and hit that little bell so that you'll get notifications when we upload new episodes. We are also on Facebook and Instagram. Those platforms are an avenue to kind of get a little bit more personal about us, and we post things on there, and we also post when we put up new episodes. But that's also a way to just get a little more personal. And we also go live on Facebook sometimes. So that's where we would be going live. So follow us on there too if you want to. And as always, I'm going to read an uninterrupted version of the letter. So until next time, enjoy. October 3rd, 1944. My darling Jimmie. It is very cold tonight, and I'm sitting in the armchair right beside the fire in order to keep warm. How I wish my darling was here, and then I would not need the fire. I hurried home tonight, hoping I would find a letter from my sweetheart, but it was not my lucky day. You can't imagine how happy I am when I get your letters. I wonder in what part of Germany you are. I know you must not tell me, but are you permitted to say whether you are attached to the 1st or 7th Army? I guess you will have a lot of experiences to relate when you return from your travels. Enough to fill a book, I should think, and I shall really love to hear about them. Well, my love, I am really very sleepy, but I just could not go to bed without writing you a few lines to say, I hope this finds you safe and well, and to say how much I long to be with my darling sweetheart. Good night, my dear love, and God bless you. With all my love, from your very own Lucy. If you're hearing this message, then you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, we are truly thankful. We hope that you'll return next time for the next episode of the All My Love, Lucy podcast.